Welcome to the Planning and Zoning meeting for Smilers Wharf. I'm David Rathbun, I'm the chairman, and seated tonight on our commission is Sean Mastrani, Ben Philbrook, Curtis Lynch, and Gardner Young. Alternates here are Peter Shemowitz, Lynn Conway, and Fred Dykeman. A few items before we begin. The exits are back there and to the front of the auditorium. I'd like to keep this meeting in a fairly orderly fashion. So if you please not start having the applause, because that tends to take up time, and it's going to be a long meeting, and I understand that we want to be able to hear everything. Way this will begin, the applicant, if you haven't been to a planning and zoning session before, the applicant will give his presentation. And then, after he has finished his presentation, all those who support the application are asked to speak. And due to the crowd, I'd like to, if possible, people could kind of limit their time to about 2 minutes. There's podiums on both sides. I'll be calling up 10 names at a time, so we can try to move things along. If someone has said what you'd like to say, just please say you agree with it. And if you do need just time to speak, after everyone has spoken, additional 3 minutes. And after that, we'll ask the opposition, anyone opposed to this application, to speak. And they will have the same times as those who were in favor of the application. And then at the end, we'll have general comments on the application. And then after that, the applicant has a right for rebuttal. And then the final thing we'll have is a staff report or staff comments. Due to the fact that I don't think we're going to get through everything tonight, the meeting will end at 11, and it will be continued to July 8th, right here in the auditorium. Sometimes we stay to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. We don't want to do that tonight. So 11 o'clock is the cutoff for tonight. Yeah. And one other thing, just a housekeeping. Someone put my email on Facebook today, and it's ex parte for me to receive personal emails, any correspondence, or any zoning application. So if you want to contact me or any member of the board, please do it through the planning office. I did that. Sean?
Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut. Okay.
No.
Hey, we forgot to do the flag.
We don't do that.
Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958, and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations for the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing at the Stonington High School, 176 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, on Monday, June 17, 2019, at 7 p.m. on the following application: PZ 1908ZC, No Inc. Shipyard Inc. Zone Change Map Amendment Master Plan for rezoning a portion of the Seaport Marine site from a Marine Commercial District MC80 to a Neighborhood Development District NDD for a mixed-use waterfront development. Properties located at 2, 4, 10, and 18 Washington Street and Willow Street. Mystic Assessors Map 182, Block 1, Lot 16, 12, 8, 7, and 6. Zone MC 80 and RC 120.
I got it. Mr. Sweeney, is your...
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? We've got a couple of microphones here, so I'll try to speak into the one that actually matters. My name is Bill Sweeney. I am a partner and a land use attorney with the law firm of Tobin Carberry in New London, Connecticut, and as always, it's a pleasure to appear before you tonight. I represent Noank Shipyard Incorporated, which has submitted a zone change master plan application for its existing Seaport Marine facility located at Washington and Willow Streets in Mystic, Connecticut. As many of you are aware, my client is a family-owned business, owned and operated, that runs not only Seaport Marine, but also the Noank Shipyard just downriver. Joining me tonight, I think in the back, is John Holstein, who is the principal owner of Noank Shipyard Incorporated, as well as his family. As many of you know, John's a longtime resident of Stonington. He's lived here since 1974. He's also a distinguished member of the business community who's volunteered with numerous community and nonprofit boards and agencies. Also joining me tonight are his daughter Abby and his son-in-law Harry Boardson, also both Stonington residents, who represent the second generation of this family business. Tonight we'll be presenting to you not just a zoning application, but a reimagined vision for the Seaport Marine site that will redevelop it from the tired and underutilized industrial boatyard that it is today to a vibrant mixed-use waterfront neighborhood that will provide a special place for residents and visitors alike to live, work, and play at the mouth of the Mystic River. This new mixed-use development would be called Smiler's Wharf. This vision has taken a number of years to evolve and refine, and it's important to understand that it's being driven by economic realities. Despite the addition of the successful Red 36 restaurant to the boatyard several years ago, many of the heavier industrial boatyard uses on site are not economically viable to be maintained long-term at this location. While the marina itself is still very successful, the boat repair, storage, and haul-out operations at Seaport Marine, which run out of a collection of aging warehouses long past their useful life, must be consolidated to the south at Seaport Marine's sister boatyard in Noank if they are to remain viable. This planned relocation of those certain boatyard uses is necessary to preserve them, but also has created an incredible opportunity to remake the peninsula, once known as Pistol Point, into a thriving waterfront development with substantial public access that does not exist today. Over the last 2 years, our design team has spent hundreds of hours carefully crafting a proposal that takes advantage of the site's unique location and characteristics, but also planning a redevelopment that is sensitive to adjacent natural resources and which will fit into the character and the fabric of the greater Mystic area. The plan we are going to present to you tonight has gone through multiple iterations, literally 24, and is substantially less intensive than the preliminary concepts we shared with you at our informal workshop with this commission last year. Contrary to the suggestion of some, this is a modest proposal for a relatively large property, with a housing density far below the lowest tiered allowed by your regulations, and new buildings on the site covering less than what is actually occupied today by the warehouses. I'd like to take a quick moment to introduce our extraordinary design team, many of whom you will hear from tonight during our presentation. Meg Lyons is our lead designer and project architect, and she's joined tonight by her associate Brian Shook, as well as Chris Thorpe, who's our landscape architect. Jane Stahl, formerly the Deputy Commissioner of Connecticut DEP, is our coastal and water dependency consultant. Ron Nault and Ron Dagon are our civil engineers and our principals with Lux Engineering. Rich Snarsky is our wetland scientist with New England Environmental Services, and Todd Brayton is our traffic engineer with Bryan Associates. Finally, Don Poland from Gorman and York Property Advisors is our fiscal impact expert. This team has been dedicated to designing a master plan for this site that is responsible, conservative, and will ultimately lead to a development that will be an asset for the community. In addition to the workshop we held with you last year, over the last few months we've presented this plan to multiple town boards and commissions in full public participation sessions with little to no opposition. We subsequently received unanimous support for the project from the Architectural Design Review Board, the Police Commission, the Conservation Commission, the Harbor Management Commission, and most recently the Economic Development Commission. Over the last year, we've also made repeated attempts to reach out to citizens of this community. We've received tremendous support from many neighbors, residents and businesses alike, both in and outside of Stonington. At this time, I'd like to submit approximately 200 letters of support that we've garnered for this project into the record. Others have expressed some concerns about the project, many of which, quite frankly, are legitimate, and which we hope to address tonight. That being said, there is a small but very vocal minority of neighboring property owners who oppose this project. We invited them for personal presentations and discussions, including giving them Mr. Bortzen's personal phone number to discuss any questions or concerns they may have. But unfortunately, to date, very few have shown any interest in meeting with us, let alone speaking to us at all. In recent weeks, there's also been some negative social media and opinion pieces attacking our project, which is regrettable, as much of it has been misleading, misguided, and often unfair. We collectively chose not to respond in kind, and instead decided to wait and make our case for the project here, in this forum, where it actually matters. If I can ask one thing of the Commission and the audience tonight, whether you are for or whether you're against this application or you're neutral, it is to listen to our presentation with an open mind. We ask you to judge the actual vision we're putting forward based on the record of this public hearing tonight, not what you may have heard or read elsewhere. We would ask you to consider the tremendous effort we've expended to make this development a special place and the sensitivity we've demonstrated to our neighbors and the community in doing so. We firmly believe the merits of our vision deserve not only your support, but the Commission's approval. We're going to make a concerted effort to move quickly through our presentation, relying primarily on our written submissions to date, so that we have plenty of time to answer your questions, allow input from both proponents and opponents, and hopefully allow the Commission to consider action very soon. So we can be effective, I would ask you to hold any questions during our presentation to the end of that presentation. I suggest you write them down as we go along so you don't forget them. We've got a lot to go through in a fairly short time, and we would appreciate your assistance in this regard. This Commission has reviewed a number of zone change master plan applications over the last few years and has become quite adept at evaluating them. Master plan zoning is an incredibly powerful tool that's being used to develop critical properties throughout this community. This Commission explicitly reiterated its commitment to the use of master plan zoning in its most recently updated Plan of Conservation and Development. As the Commission is aware, these types of master plan applications, like the one you're going to see tonight, are very different from the special permits and site plans that the Commission reviews on a routine and regular basis. Master plans are conceptual plans, and the approval of a master plan does not actually approve any construction whatsoever, but instead sets forth a guide and a framework for the future development of a site, typically over a number of phases and years of implementation. Master plan districts are floating zones, and they can land on various eligible properties, and they provide enhanced flexibility in terms of the uses allowed and the bulk and dimensional requirements that are applied. This inherent flexibility permits property owners and developers to reimagine their properties and designers to be creative and propose projects that would not otherwise be allowed. There's a price to pay for that flexibility, though, and that is that the Commission has broad and sweeping discretion to approve or deny these types of applications in their legislative capacity. There are 5 different master plan districts in your zoning regulations, and we're seeking tonight to rezone a portion of the Seaport Marine site from the Marine Commercial District to the Neighborhood Development District, otherwise known as the NDD. It is notable that the Marine Commercial District, which is in place now, already allows a variety of industrial-type commercial uses related to boatyards and marinas, as well as a number of non-water-dependent uses like restaurants and bars and offices and wholesalers, and even uses like boarding houses. The NDD designation itself is not a new regulation. It was adopted back in 2005, but it was created with the understanding that there are commercially zoned properties in our villages which are keystone parcels and provide unique opportunities for new development which can enhance the character of the community. The NDD was specifically intended to encourage the reclamation and the redevelopment of these keystone properties, especially underutilized commercial parcels, and allow for new construction, renovation, and adaptive reuse. The Seaport Marine site is such a keystone site, and it is eligible for this designation as it is at least 150,000 square feet in size, is commercially zoned, and has access to public water and sewer. The NDD explicitly promotes a diversity of housing opportunities in these developments, including especially mixed-use development of a nature that is compatible with surrounding areas. In evaluating master plans submitted under the NDD regulations, the Commission is guided by your Plan of Conservation and Development, the Coastal Management Act, and perhaps most importantly, it must ensure harmony and compatibility with the surrounding village area. In my mind, it is this issue of harmony and compatibility that will be the crux of your work in evaluating our application. I would stress to you that the NDD regulations do not require a property owner or developer to match or to replicate the uses or architectural designs of adjacent or nearby properties. In fact, it's inherently understood that Stonington's villages are distinctively mixed use already, with clusters of older homes on side streets behind and aside commercial and waterfront uses and buildings. It's inevitable then that NDD-eligible sites, which must be commercially zoned to begin with, will interface with these village neighborhoods. But this is the important part. They don't need to be extensions of them. They only need to be compatible with them. Harmony does not require everyone playing the same note. You need complementary counterparts. A diversity in land use and design is necessary to create the fabric and tapestry of a successful neighborhood. Master plans must only demonstrate that they fit into a larger context of the commercial, residential, and mixed-use neighborhoods that surround these sites. Now, if approved, a master plan submitted under the NDD regulations becomes a blueprint for the future development of a site. As I mentioned earlier, that development is typically implemented in a series of phases, each of which has to come back before this commission for a detailed individual review, another public hearing, through an engineered site plan approval process. This framework provides an inherent protection for the commission and the community as a whole to make sure that a master plan project is developed in a cohesive, coherent, and deliberate fashion over a number of phases and years. It's important to remember that a project of this complexity also requires other approvals and infrastructure build-out, whether it's obtaining permits from the Office of State Traffic Administration, from the Connecticut DEP, or the Army Corps of Engineers, or upgrading sewer facilities or changing roadways servicing the project. These additional approvals alone can take additional time, sometimes even years, let alone the construction of the project itself. So it's critically important tonight to realize this is not the end of the development and permit process, nor it is even the beginning of the end. At best, tonight is the end of the beginning. And the Commission and other regulators will be intimately involved and remain significantly in control of the various phases of this project going forward to ensure that it's developed responsibly. At each phase, a property owner or developer must verify its initial assumptions and show ongoing compliance with the master plan or seek modifications of that master plan if circumstances or conditions change. As Ms. Lyons and the rest of our team will share with you in a moment, each building and use that is part of our master plan has been carefully designed in concert with the NDD regulations, using the NDD's flexibility to create a truly special project. We believe that the NDD regulations were intended to bring new life back to properties, like the Seaport Marine site, to create innovative and exciting mixed-use opportunities out of rundown locations, to generate new vibrancy in our villages and on the waterfront, and to promote economic growth both directly and indirectly from renewed investment throughout this community. Tonight, please join us as we share our vision for Smiler's Wharf. At this time, we're going to move to the actual presentation on the screen. As I understand previously, I think the Commission's going to come down so they can view it, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Meg Lyons.
Get some new microphones out of the way. Should I talk to Jason?
I'll do it.
Good evening. Can you hear me? I'm Meg Lyons. I thought I would begin tonight with a bit of background about myself to explain who I am and how I'm connected to Stonington and Mystic. My family moved to Stonington over 40 years ago, so you can consider me a local architect. I hold an undergraduate degree from Wesleyan University and a master's degree in architecture from the Harvard Graduate School of Design. With 30 years of experience in design and construction, I've worked on a wide range of projects, including 8 different master planning and urban planning projects, as well as buildings large and small. I spent 14 years with Centerbrook Architects, where, among other things, I was project manager and lead architect on the Ocean House in Watch Hill. I've lived in Boston, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, but chose to come home to Stonington, where my husband and I have raised our daughter. We've lived in the Stonington borough for 24 years. Located on a key site on the Mystic River, the master plan for Smiler's Wharf has the potential to significantly enhance downtown Mystic. Today I'll be reviewing the history of the site and its existing conditions and sharing with you our vision of how it could be transformed. That's essentially the site within the circle. Originally called Pistol Point, the site was historically the location of various manufacturing industries, including shipbuilding, production of steam engines, a woolen mill, and a window blind factory. This diorama from the Mystic Seaport Museum gives us a sense of what this side of the river looked like around 1900. Cottrell Street, I'm lost it. Cottrell Street still ends at Washington, as it does today. And you can see at that location was a very prominent brick mill building with a prominent smokestack. This was the J.O. Cottrell Sash and Blind Factory. Willow Street continued into the site as it does today. There's an additional cross street that no longer exists. The most prominent feature of the site was the Mystic Iron Works, where steam engines and later textile were produced. Oops. This is an enormous building, 420 feet long. We won't be building anything that size. Surely it dominates the landscape. You can see the scale of this in relation to the rest of the buildings in Mystic. While both the Ironworks factory and the Sash and Blind Mill were gone by the early part of the 20th century, because of its prominent river location, the property continued being used for the manufacturing of boats. In the 1920s, Pistol Point was the location of Franklin Post and Son shipbuilders who specialized in commercial fishing boats and power yachts. Their canny business strategy was to provide boats to both the Coast Guard and the rum runners who were trading in contraband alcohol during Prohibition. The Coast Guard boats were outfitted with a single powerful V12 engine, the rum runners with 3 engines. You could hear the roar of the engines up and down Fisher's Island Sound. One of the individuals with deep ties to the syndicate and credited with the design of the boats was Arthur Smiler Rowland. We have taken his nickname as an inspiration for our development. This aerial, taken sometime before 1960, indicates that the property was no longer being used for manufacturing activities, but as an industrial shipyard. So it's sort of this zone. It looks pretty much as it does today. Warehouse buildings remain and have grown in number, with a footprint covering 67,000 square feet. There are a series of docks, finger piers, and boat basins. The restaurant Red 36 sits at the southern end of the property. This is obviously Willow Street, and you can see that Willow, though it's paved, it sort of stops and becomes mostly a gravel roadway. There's Red 36, sorry. So how do we, from the vehicular point of view, this is what we see at the end of Cottrell Street. Unpainted metal sheds, sagging asphalt roofs, misshapen additions to a building with no front door. In effect, a wall of derelict industrial buildings. Meanwhile, the pedestrian faces a moat with water separating you. This is where the sidewalk ends, with no further public access. So how do we transform this key piece of property at the heart of Mystic? How do we take the liveliness and activity of the restaurant scene at Red 36 and connect it back to the rest of Mystic? This is the existing site plan. Red 36 is here, the Allen Spool Mill is there, and all of the gray are the existing warehouses. We propose to demolish the existing warehouses and create a mixed-use development that combines commercial and residential uses with public open space, developing 7.5 acres of the total 11.4 acre parcel. We will create a pedestrian spine right down here, all the way to Red 36, that extends Cottrell Street. That becomes our boardwalk. Much like the Mystic River Park, this will give access to the river's edge, and like communities around the country, we will reclaim the water's edge from our industrial past. The heart of the project is centered around a new boat basin with new investment in infrastructure with bulkheads along the river. This will effectively raise a protective barrier to floodwaters. Framing the entry to the boardwalk on one side is a kayak pavilion, inviting the public out onto the water. The building will be a simple raised wooden platform with awning structures for shade. The plan includes a handicap launch for disabled kayakers, allowing universal accessibility. This is coupled with a bike rack and signage that celebrates the history of the site. The other building that greets the visitor at the end of Cottrell and Washington is a 45-room hotel. It is a 5-story building with a ground floor devoted entirely to parking. The building will include an outdoor terrace and a rooftop lounge open to hotel guests for breakfast service and evening cocktails. This hotel's brick architecture is inspired by the tradition of New England mills, like the Cottrell sash and blind plant that once stood at this very spot. Continuing up the boardwalk, one arrives at a plaza offering views of the river. This public gathering space of more than 5,000 square feet, built over structured parking, has stairways and ramps that connect it both to the boardwalk on the west and parking on the east. Facing the plaza, opposite the hotel, is a marine services building that will include commercial office space, bathroom, and laundry facilities for visiting boaters, and a clear span space on the first floor for community meetings, farmers markets, and private events. The building has been designed like a barn with a mixture of clapboard and shingles with twin cupolas on the roof. On the other side of the boat basin is a new 200-seat restaurant. Like its sister restaurant, Red 36 will combine an interior dining room with outdoor decks. The main restaurant space will be constructed with open metal trusses, providing double-height space with expansive water views. With a nod to the site's industrial heritage, the building exterior will be made with rough-hewn wood planks and a corrugated metal roof. Continuing through the site, the pedestrian route brings you back down to grade facing a crescent-shaped park with a view of the spool mill. The spool mill is actually this gray building right there. The park is envisioned as a public amenity with arcing sitting walls, that's what these are, each 18 inches high. By terracing the grade, the parallel parking behind will effectively be shielded from view. So these will essentially be hidden. The residential component of the project consists of 3 types of housing. At the bend in the river, we propose an apartment building with 25 units. The building is 6 stories with the first floor devoted entirely to parking. Responding to the river's edge, the building is gently curved in plan and includes 2 lower portions, east and west, that help break down the mass and provide variation. The exterior will be clad with wood shiplap siding. On the east side of the property, along a cove, we propose a group of 16 townhouses, which will enjoy more private views of the river and the adjacent wetlands. Each attached residence includes a lower-level garage for 2 cars and 2.5 floors of residential space. These structures will be clad with wood shingles and have asphalt roofs. Finally, looping back through the site, we've located 6 units of multifamily housing along Washington and Willow Street. Each unit is designed as a 2-bedroom flat. Exteriors will be clapboarded with asphalt roofs. To meet FEMA regulations, all new buildings are required to have the first floor habitable space 2 feet above the base flood elevation of 11, yielding a first floor elevation at 13. Ground floors will be reserved for parking. At Smiler's Wharf, a combination of structured parking and at-grade lots will provide 318 parking spaces on site, supplemented with an additional 106 off-site, for a total of 422 parking spaces. Using a reasonable shared parking model, we can accommodate all required parking at the peak period. That would be weekend evenings in the summer. 9 months of the year, we will likely have excess parking. While some new development assumes, meaning other projects, not ours, assumes the existing street grid will absorb growth, Smiler's Wharf will not burden existing street parking. I'm going to say that again. While some new developments elsewhere assume the existing street grid will absorb growth, Smiler's Wharf will not burden existing street parking. Also, keep in mind, if visitors can't find space on the Groton side of the river on the street, they're required to pay for parking. At Smiler's Wharf, 132 parking spaces are unassigned, essentially adding free public parking to downtown Mystic, built by and paid for by the development. The Smiler's Wharf development will even remove snow for free from that parking at no charge to the town. In envisioning the architecture of the project, we looked to historic precedent within Mystic and the surrounding communities. We've looked at important buildings like the main block in terms of massing and materials. The powerhouse and Randall's Wharf directly across the river also provide context. Choosing to construct the hotel in brick, for instance, creates a dialogue with those prominent masonry buildings across the river. We looked not just at the heights of buildings, but their lengths and widths to understand general massing and the relationship of the building to the street. In choosing materials for our buildings, again, we looked at the context of downtown Mystic. While the neighboring architecture may feel homogeneous, there is actually a good deal of variety, both in style and materials. One finds a preponderance of wood, clapboard, and shingle, of course, but brick, stone, and metal make appearance with some regularity. Taking all of this as our cue, the buildings at Smiler's Wharf embrace various prototypes and materials. And this shows the kind of variety that we have in architectural style and material. Our intention for site lighting will be to provide safe and efficient circulation without lighting up the night sky. The selected fixtures will be low profile with full cutoff to minimize light pollution. The same intention will be applied to signage to provide safe wayfinding without a lot of excessive graphic noise. Finally, street trees and landscaping are intended to augment the experience of this newly refreshed part of Mystic. One of the prime objectives of the master plan has been to enhance view sheds. The existing warehouses create a visual barrier to the river. But by opening up the site, we will now allow people to see through the property and create new vistas in Mystic. Widening Willow Street and removing derelict warehouses will allow the public to have a clear view of the renovated spool mill. Locating a park at the heart of the plan will provide open space and uninterrupted views. By continuing Cottrell Street as a pedestrian way, we will reinforce the existing street pattern of Mystic and simultaneously provide a view through the site. By locating the public plaza across from the boat basin, we will create views to the Groton side of Mystic. There's been some concern about the height of some of the proposed buildings at Smiler's Wharf. Keep in mind, we have been tasked with balancing FEMA regulations, which force us to elevate all structures, with economic feasibility and historic precedent. Towards that end, we had neighboring buildings surveyed by an engineer to understand relative heights. Most of the prominent buildings in Mystic fall within the 50 to 60 foot range. Our apartment building at 6 stories has a cornice line at 67 feet with mechanical penthouses set back from the edge at 74 feet. 5 stories of residences above 1 level of parking is necessary for us to achieve the most modest Tier 1 development. In fact, we don't even reach the Tier 1 threshold of 60 units. This development has only 47. The decision to place the apartment building on the river was a conscious choice, locating the tallest building where there is space and light around it, rather than on the corner of Willow and Washington, where it would be across the street from 2-story residences. Stonington Commons in the borough is a similar model to our apartment building, ground floor parking with residences above. Stonington Commons, some 330 feet long, sits directly on the sidewalk less than 50 feet from 2-story residences. Our apartment building is 700 feet from any neighboring houses. While Stonington Commons is not located in downtown Mystic, it is new construction in one of Stonington's villages. Bringing this back to Mystic, let's look at more immediate context to address the concerns about scale within a village setting. The main block sits directly on the sidewalk and rises 53'4" to the cornice line with mechanical penthouses topping off at 62 feet. Our proposed hotel is set back from the curb by 25 feet with a cornice line at 55 feet, with rooftop structures topping off at 63. So in this diagram, I've placed these buildings side by side, including the Allen Spool Mill, to give you a sense that we really have kept the scale of Smiler's Wharf's buildings within a reasonable range of other buildings in Mystic and Stonington while still complying with FEMA regulations. Other concerns voiced about Smiler's Wharf is that it is a massive development. In fact, it is not. Compare our floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is the amount of square footage you put on a particular piece of land. With the adjacent, compare ours with the adjacent Cottrell Street zone, DB5. That zone allows a floor area ratio of 0.6. The new buildings at Smiler's Wharf puts our floor area ratio at 0.598. We are completely in keeping with the level of development on adjacent properties in Mystic. Density and mass are not just a matter of building height. This simple numerical comparison demonstrates that when considering length, width, and height, a truer understanding of a building's impact on a site. Our most prominent buildings are consistent with the main block. The numbers make it very clear. In an apples-to-apples comparison, by taking FEMA out of the equation, shows that our two largest buildings, at 52,000 square feet and 35,000 square feet, are very much in keeping with the main block at 51,000 square feet, a building we've all been living with for 100 years. In planning Smiler's Wharf, we reviewed and followed the Plan of Conservation and Development, especially the chapter on villages. This project encourages foot and bicycle traffic, allows public access to the river, balances floodplain requirements with preservation of character, and supports and strengthens neighboring businesses. The project invests in commercial property and addresses parking issues. We have expanded Mystic Street Grid, developed a network of sidewalks and street trees, added a public park for sought-after open space, maintained water-dependent uses, and created a walkable neighborhood, all in an effort to further the village characteristics of Mystic. Our intention for this project is not just to develop underused land, but to transform a blighted portion of downtown Mystic. This is an effort in placemaking, connecting it bridge to bridge, framing this piece of river from the historic Bascule Bridge to the swinging railroad bridge. What was once an unwelcoming industrial site will now be an open and inviting way to experience the river's edge. Smiler's Wharf turns what is private property into a public asset. We'd now like to share a video created with a 3D model of Smiler's Wharf. The first half of the video takes you from a bird's eye view and flies around the site, and then we come down to more of a pedestrian view and do another circuit.